In this video series, we're going to be trying to brew the best NEIPA we can, the haziest, the juiciest, something with fantastic and complex kind of hop aroma. And we're going to be trying different hopping techniques, dry hopping techniques, different amounts in the Whirlpool, whilst trying to kind of reduce as much as what we possibly can the oxygen kind of post fermentation. So we love hazies on this channel. I love hazies. Raphael likes hazies. You can probably tell if you're a subscriber to the channel that I do a lot of beer reviews, probably more than one or two too much, but you know, we love this style, and in this series we're going to be creating what we believe a fantastic homebrew NEIPA with that. You know, disregarding a little bit the cost of hops, we'll be throwing loads and loads of hops at these beers, and Raphael and I will be filming our different brew days when we attempt a NEIPA, and when we get one that we're proud of, that we've shown our friends and other home brewers, other craft beer lovers, and they're particularly happy with, we're going to turn that into a brew day, and this is the first one of that. So. You know, in the future, we're going to be then inviting some other craft beer lovers, maybe subscribers to the channel, other home brewers to do the beer tasting with us at the end. But for this brew day, we're just going to be you know, showing the recipe, showing the brew day, and then Raphael will join at the end of the video to taste the beer and kind of give our impression. So without further ado, thanks for joining. If this is your first time watching, please consider subscribing to the channel. We've almost hit 1,000 subscribers. We've got loads of brew days coming up, and we appreciate any support that we can get. So let's jump across to the recipe. Okay, so we're across to Brewfather. The name of these beers that we're going to be doing, we're going to be calling it B.T.S, so Brew Taste Style, Hazier, Juicier, #1, and then we'll list out the hops. So before we get into the recipe, let's talk specifically about the hops and the hop selection here. So obviously Mosiac, it's obviously very common in this style, but Motueka Vic Secret. So I'm going to start with Motueka. So I've tasted a load of beers out of kind of New Zealand specifically that had Motueka in it, and you know, I had a kilo in the fridge, and I love that kind of that tropical kind of that tropical element or that character that Motueka brings, and obviously kind of that little bit of that citrus as well. So Mosiac and Motueka, I think we thought would kind of pair quite nicely, and then Vic Secret. So Vic Secret is a bit of a fascination for me lately. I've tasted a load of beers that you know, haven't necessarily known the hops, and I've tasted like what's that, and a lot of the time it's been Vic Secret. So that kind of that pineapple, that kind of pine, a little bit of kind of passion fruit in there as well. Haven't brewed a beer with these three together, but definitely thought this was a good place to start. So. The grain bill here is reasonably straightforward. We don't want to do something too kind of complex. We're looking just for that base malt, the oats rather, the wheat and the carapils. You know, 8.7% each of the wheat. In the future, we're going to be doing also an oat cream NEIPA series, which is going to be obviously a lot more oats, but we think that's a good place to start from the fermentables perspective. So onto the hops. So there's about 573 grams, let's call it 600 grams of hops in this recipe. The batch volume was about 21 litres, so it's quite a bit of hops, obviously. 15 grams per litre, that's just for the dry hop. There's a bunch of Whirlpool additions, and you know, you can see up at the top right hand corner, we've tried to still fit in the New England IPA style, and there's a load of kind of hops in the Whirlpool, which has brought up the IBU to about 56. It's probably about that. You know, I've tasted the beer obviously, and it's not these kind of super low bitterness. There is kind of a little bit of bitterness in there. We wanted to leave the kind of zero bitterness NEIPAs to the oat cream NEIPA series that we're going to be doing. But you can see here, 40 minute, 30 minute, 20 minute additions. So a total of 40 minutes in the Whirlpool, just kind of constantly stirring. We'll go through that, and you'll see that in the brew day. And then day 1, kind of pitching hops at the same time as yeast, and then day 7 doing the second kind of dry hop. The recipe, as always, is always in the YouTube description. but we'll go into you know, the dry hopping method when we get into the shots of the brew day. So the down to the kind of the water profile, I use the same profile as what we did with the Juicy Bits NEIPA. I found that was a really good mix of kind of bringing a little bit of malt character, not too much bitterness. So we've kind of stuck with that same water profile there, and you can see that's just reflected. Obviously, some yeast nutrients for the yeast, and we used this is the Verdant IPA yeast. You know, it's quite popular at the moment. It's the first time I've brewed with it. I had fantastic results, and I'll certainly be using this again. There is a calculator, so I've just gone with 2 packages, and that the ferment was fine. I think the next time we're going to be a bit more accurate with the amount of yeast that we pitch. There's a yeast pitch calculator that will link in the YouTube description that you can kind of just put in your kind of batch size, and it'll tell you how much. I think for this one it calculated like 1.8, so I think 2 packages is okay. And then going down into the mash profile, so 65 degrees for 60 minutes, and then a mash out of 75-ish degrees for 10 minutes. The fermentation profile, so I started off at 20 degrees. And I've got with the fermentation log after the brew day, which I'll show, but just starting off at 20 degrees, leaving it till it kind of fermented, then doing kind of diacetyl rest, and then dropping down to 15 degrees, and then kind of dry hopping, and then cold crashing down to 2 degrees. So that's the recipe. Again, it's all kind of shared in the YouTube description. Let's jump across to the videos of the brew day. Okay, so no real problems with the mash-in. We hit numbers, I believe. We'll have a shot of that in a moment, but no problem with the sparge or anything like that. No blocked mash, didn't use any rafts holes or anything like that, so no problems there. The gravity, it's a terrible shot, but I think we got kind of pre-boil gravity at about, what does that say? I can't even read it. 56, 57, something like that. Got to do a better job at those readings. The next one is better. I think it was 1065, 1066, something like that. Before we get into this, let me just pause there. Before we get into this, obviously there was a whirlpool that needed to take place. So after the boil finished, dropped the temperature down to 78, 80, just trying to hover around that temperature. Added the hops, continuously stirred. For each 10-minute block, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes of that, and then kind of let it steep, and then add the next hops, stir, let it steep. There was no like, I just added the hops directly into the Brewzilla, and then obviously got a clog pump, but emptied into the Fermzilla using kind of the Brewzilla tap. So let's go back here. Added the first hop addition at the same time as pitching yeast. We're going to play around with that in the future, but the results we got are pretty good. 2 packs of the Verdant yeast, and then just trying to give that a nice big shake prior to kind of putting it into the fridge. No pressure fermenting here, just letting it kind of dry, blow off at least until kind of approaching the end of the fermentation, and then introducing some pressure at the end there. So this is a couple of days in. Fantastic color, very happy with the color at that point. The next one is kind of approaching the end of fermentation, not done with fermentation, but towards the end of fermentation. Put the collection jar in there. I just wanted to remove some of that hops kind of sitting at the bottom for I think 4 days or 5 days at that time. So trying to reduce any astringency. So just obviously sanitize everything again, and then just try to kind of drop off the hops before fermentation had done, so then with the view to remove those hops and then to do the dry hop a couple of days later. So a couple of days later, we hit final gravity, let it sit there for about a day just to confirm that. You see that I introduced some pressure there. I'm just trying to drop down the pressure down to 1 or 2 psi, so that when I try to remove the collection jar, things aren't going to like spew out. So that was the thinking behind that. After that, you can see here, just letting out the pressure of the carb, not the carb cap, but the lid on the other side, and just a little bit kind of came out, so it didn't kind of explode out, which is kind of what I was going for. After that, just remove that collection jar, sanitized again. Obviously, it's fully fermented at this point, so aside from oxygen, just want to make sure everything's completely sanitized. Trying to check everything twice, 3 times. So now it's all sanitized. I've got the dry hop in the collection jar. attaching it again, just maybe being a little too pedantic there, but then kind of attaching the collection jar back to the FermZilla, purging, trying to limit the amount of oxygen that's in that collection jar prior to doing the dry hop. And once that's kind of attached, then I wanted to try something different that I've been thinking about for a while, kind of turning the FermZilla upside down. So everything's purged in there at the moment, just being careful to kind of turn it upside down and then to try to drop those hops in and then close that collection jar just so there's no, whatever small bit of oxygen is introduced to the solution, then kind of turning it back the other way and purging it out. So it was quite easy to do this. I had to kind of open the collection jar and give it a bit of a shake to make sure all those hops kind of went in there, and then closing that back up, throwing it back around the right way, and then putting it back into the fermenter. So right here, what I didn't mention is that after the fermentation was done, we increased it to about 23 degrees. So it was on up to 23 degrees, just to try to clear up any of that diacetyl or anything like that. And then after fermentation was done, and we knew it was done, dropping it down to 15 degrees, and then kind of doing this process. So then adding the dry hop, dropping the dry hops into solution, and then after it's in there, gradually kind of bring the temperature down to about 2 degrees, and once it's down at 2 degrees, 2 degrees, letting the hops sit there for about 2 days. Now I did go in there because I know there's like a hop utilization drop off with the amount of hops we're using here, so I just made sure once it was down, or even as it was going down at 2 degrees, whenever I was home, kind of got the FermZilla, kind of made a little whirlpool just to make sure, try to get those hops as much in solution as possible, rather than just like kind of letting it sit down the bottom. So that is what we done. Obviously, after all of this happened in closed transfer from the FermZilla to the keg, maybe with like a little bit of a taster in between. Obviously, let it sit in the keg for it to kind of carbonate over about 5, 6, 7 days, and that was it. I was pleased with the start, but before I comment anymore, it's time to taste the beer. Raphael is going to join us here. Hey, welcome, Raphael. Before we get into tasting the beer, let's just run through the fermentation profile. So starting off at 20 degrees, letting it go for about 5 or 6 days. So you're 20 degrees here in the blue, and this is the gravity. Took about 4 or 5 days to get down to fully fermented, then kind of raise the temperature up to about 23 degrees for a couple of days to try to clear up any of that diacetyl, and then we can see the orange line here is just kind of starting to increase some pressure. So as soon as fermentation was done, just tried to increase some pressure, dropped down to 15 degrees, kind of removed all the excess kind of hops and probably the yeast, dry hopped to 15 degrees, then cold crashed down to 2 degrees and let it sit there at 2 degrees for a couple of days. So that's the fermentation profile. Let's taste some beer.
Go.
Okay, cheers. Okay, so the colour looks fantastic. Kind of what we were chasing for with that kind of haziness.
Hazy, golden. Lovely.
As soon as we poured, got a good hit of hops, but from a hop perspective, what do you get on the nose?
So you get the classic, so you use Mosiac, right?
Mosiac, Motueka, and Vic Secret. I definitely get a bit of the character of the Vic Secret coming through.
Yeah, the Vic Secret, I think, is more like fruity and a little bit citrusy.
Yep.
Not citrusy, but yeah, it has that like fresh hops.
Yeah. I mean, the Mosiac's kind of clearly there as well. I think there's some good character coming from the Motueka as well, like that kind of tropical, general kind of speaking, tropical flavours. But
yeah, so that's probably the word we use for every NEIPA, but it's quite a lot of mango.
Yeah, there's definitely mango in there, and with the risk of again sort of saying the same things, tropical pineapple, mango.
That's what it is.
Yeah. I think the colour's fantastic. I had tried this beer before, so let's get on the taste. Cheers. So the first thing to note, I guess, we're discussing this before, is there's a bit of bitterness there, right? I think on the recipe it calls out to be, I think it calculated it to be about 56 IBU. 56 IBU. So it's definitely there.
Yeah.
I don't mind it, I like all types of NEIPA. I like the kind of super low bitterness and the ones with a little bit of bitterness in there. As we said before, in the oat cream kind of series, we're going to be focusing on a little bit more of that kind of lower bitterness, right?
But I think this one works because otherwise it can get like too sweet or too fruity. This one has a little bit of bitterness. It makes the beer a little bit more drinkable.
I think a bit more interesting as well. With that amount of hops in there and with that amount of Whirlpool, we're definitely going to get some bitterness. But I think that kind of the juiciness is there, right? The hop aroma is there. It doesn't
so
taste
I did drink this beer before as well, and I remember I was asking you about the final gravity because it feels like big. It feels like something like 10-18, 10-16, but it came down to 10-14.
10-14, that's right. Yeah. 10-14.
So it's probably like from the all this juice character. It gives this mouthfeel very fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely something you can drink more of. It's like 7% beer, so I don't taste any of the alcohol or anything in there. Maybe that's where that body's coming from. But yeah, I mean, this, like we say, this is going to be the first in the series of what we're going to be calling kind of brew taste style, hazy and juicy. This is the first one we've done that we're kind of proud of. I think you should definitely give it a try. We'll be doing a couple more of these in the future.
So as we say on the thumbnail, 600 grams total hops.
600 grams, yep.
Probably one of the most expensive beer.
Oh, definitely.
Done.
Definitely.
Is it worth it?
I think so. I'm going to go again. Maybe I'll probably play around with like the way that the amount of kind of hops in the Whirlpool, maybe bring that bitterness down a little bit. But I want to play around. We've got some cryo hops on the way, so maybe we can play around with some Citra or Mosiac cryo and some other kind of hops, Sabro and Vic Secret ones I want to play with.
Yeah, like I said, it's a little bit expensive, like for a homebrew, you know. But if you compare this one to if you buy a beer at this level, you're gonna pay around $15 a can at least.
10 if you're lucky, $15 most of the time, isn't it? And sometimes more. So we'll definitely do this again. We love hops. Please get in touch. For any styles you'd like to see us brew. We do loads of different content on the channel, brew days, how-tos.
But I think the channel at the moment is more like NEIPAs, right?
Well, yeah, that's probably my fault. So we're going to branch out a little bit for our kind of. We've got a very special beer we're about to brew coming up. So stay tuned for that, and let's wrap it up there. Appreciate you guys watching. Until the next brew day. Cheers.